The time has come to tell the truth.
I'll wake up and smell the coffee.
Today is the beginning of a new chapter.
Another future's possible, but we've got to fight for it.
Order!
Hello and welcome to the Debated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will. And in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Metin Pekin, the author of Breaking Democracy's Chains, Freeing and Fortifying Democracy Against Hidden Capture. Welcome to the podcast, Metin.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for having me.
It is wonderful to have you on. Now, the first question I'd like to ask is, what made you want to write this book in the first place? Where did you get the idea to write it?
I think, like many people, I've came to the conclusion that the system was broken, or it was working as it was intended, but it was broken from our point of view, from the democracy point of view. It started off by saying, well, we vote, yes. We change leaders, yes, absolutely. We've gone through several leaders in this country, from Tony Blair to latest Keir Starmer and everybody in between. We've changed 5 or 6 leaders, 7 leaders in as many years nearly. And we don't even elect our prime minister. I'm not a partisan person. I'm from a working class. However, I always looked at the policies. I've been fortunate enough to get into business and be successful in business. But I always thought that I had gained a lot from this community, this country, this education. And I thought it's only fair that I contribute something back into the community and get the debate going. So my conclusion was, I've come to the conclusions many years back, and probably when Tony Blair has joined George Bush to invade Iraq, that's when the problem started in the back of my head to say, well, here we've got a left-wing government joining a right-wing government in states, and they're both going to war, what proved to be on false evidence, and resulted in, according to some estimates, million Iraqi deaths, thousands of American soldiers and British soldiers, which US later, Trump later kind of belittled it and said they don't do X, Y, and Z, not even appreciating what this country had put towards that war. So that's all been brewing in the back of my head, and I've said, well, we've got to look into this. Surely there's a problem, and probably it comes from my background, business acumen, because in business you either solve problems or you get sidelines, somebody else takes over. And changing people in business doesn't change results. You realize very quickly that you really need to change incentives. You need to change systems in order to get different outcomes. If we continue doing the same thing that we are doing, it will be naive to expect something different outcome at the end of it. So that's what led me to write this book. And I have realized that the system is not working right for the masses. It is working perfectly for the small minority. You can call it a billionaire class or whatever you want to call it. But that's if you like, the crux of the idea behind writing this book. And I think there's a solution there.
And in the book, you cite a couple of examples of leaders who you feel have been undermined in some ways, and therefore haven't been able to kind of like achieve the things that they otherwise would have been. So, for example, you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, and I think you also mentioned the claim that's made in Nadine Dorris's book, The Plot, about Boris Johnson being removed by a section of the Conservative Party. Do you think that part of the issue people have with politics at the moment is that kind of like sense that there are certain individuals, whether they be on the left or the right, so like whether they be Corbyn, Sanders, or Johnson, who have managed to achieve some sort of like some success, some sort of like support, but are then being undermined and not being able to fulfill the things that they, kind of have got people supporting them, and the things they have promised. Do you think this has undermined people's belief in how politics can change people's lives, and how much voting for an individual or supporting an individual like Corbyn, Sanders, Johnson can actually result in any specific change?
Interesting question. Yes, and I'd like to answer it in a broader terms.
Mhm.
Please pull me back if I digress too much onto the specifics, but I think it deserves a broader answer.
Mhm.
The reason I have included examples on the left and on the right, Corbyn being on the left, Johnson being on the right, Sanders in another country, and even made references to French Le Pen
Mhm.
kind of a people, so that your viewers understand that I don't take sides.
Mhm.
And I actually think uh, the left is no longer left in any case, and the right is no longer right as it was 50 years back, 30 years back,
Mhm.
whatever time frame you want to take there. I think it's all blurred into one since, especially Tony Blair with the New Labour, because he
Mhm.
rolled out red carpet to Murdoch's and whatever it is, and started to get funding from the corporations. And as the trade unions were killed by Margaret Thatcher in 80s, the funding had to shift, and industry had moved. Don't forget that industry and jobs were lost to Far East, to China and other places. Coal mines were closed, heavy industries were closed, and the town that I live in, Doncaster, Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, was heavily unemployment was high, and social problems, and you name it, the rest of it. So Tony Blair had kind of blurred those left and right lines in this country as far as I can see.
Mhm.
So coming back to undermining the leaders, well, the leaders are compromised, in my view, before they get into power. That's one problem. But yes, specifically Jeremy Corbyn, when even the army was target practicing, that if he comes in, there'll be a coup, and so on and so forth, was really unfair because whether we agree with his politics or not, I think he had massive popular support and he could have been elected if it wasn't for the mass media and the slur campaign that got rid of him. So yes, I think there are forces that undermine these people, and Nadine Dorries explains that in her book, The Plot, how an elected prime minister is pushed out by the party machines. And subsequently, a lot of people came out and said a lot of things in that department, but it kind of moves towards the conspiracy theory. We want to kind of come back to tangible points here.
Mhm.
So, in specific answer to your question, I do believe the leaders are undermined one way or another if they are working against the entrenched elite interests. Now, I think the problem is in the system itself, not just no charismatic leader will ever be able to solve the problem for us or rescue us from this problem. We've got to identify the problem correctly, identify the root causes, so that we can begin to mend it or remedy it correctly as well. Because we have no hope of fixing the problem if we don't identify it correctly in the first place.
Mhm.
So, where is the problem? Well, the problem is in the party system. The parties, political parties, have been captured through through money, basically. Now, if you take the recent developments in British politics with the Reform UK gaining all these councils and whatever, where is the loyalty of Reform or Nigel Farage going to lie? Is it going to be is it going to be with the people who voted for him for Reform, or is it going to be with the funders that put, or the funder that put in 12 plus million into his campaign, 5 million in his personal bank account? Well, I don't think it takes a genius to work that one out. Obviously, the loyalty is going to be with Christopher Harbour. Now, Nigel Farage has much admitted that it was a reward, that 5 million was a reward for his hard work over 20 odd years to get Britain out of Europe. Who chooses our leaders? Is it the ballot or is it the wallet? It certainly seems like, I mean, if Farage becomes the prime minister, which if the trend continues, he has every possibility of becoming one, then it's certainly not the ballot that decides it. The ballot is used. It's the wallet that decides who becomes our leaders. And look, the policies of some of those populists, and this is not to say I disagree with the concerns of Farage supporters. So I want to reinforce that I'm not, I've not got a political opinion on left or right, because I think I agree with some of the things on the left, with some other things on the right. But if a politician can be bought as cheap as a few £1 million, and then they decide our future, we have a problem here. We have a problem because that's not democracy. Because in democracy, the power lies with the people, and people that represent us are supposed to be accountable to the voters. But that is not the case, because we have a filtered choice. You and I go to the ballot box and to put our vote in, and we look at the choice that we have. It's not a real choice. It's a filtered choice. So there is gatekeeping to the power through political parties. What happens is that they give us a curated list of people that we can vote for. And then once those MPs are at the parliament, they have a 3-tier whip system that they basically tell our representatives which way to vote under party discipline. And then the laws or the policies that are being drafted by the think tanks supported by the billionaires. That becomes the law with all these loopholes for the billionaires. That's why they end up paying so little taxes. And then ordinary people, ordinary working people are shouldering all the burden. Now, it became so bad that the elite capture has not been confined to the government, to the executive. It's spread into other governmental bodies. It's spread into media, for instance. Now, media concentration is not accidental, because this elite, I mean, there's a book by, it's called Manufacturing Consent by, name escapes me now, but I'll mention that. Noam Chomsky, yeah. And he brilliantly explains how media has become part of the ruling elite, and they manufacture consent. So in media, it's supposed to be the fourth estate. It is supposed to be the watchdog guarding the interest of the public. It's supposed to be questioning the authority, questioning the governments, and holding governments to an account.
Hmm.
But look what happens in media. That's totally been captured as well, more or less, because we haven't got that same choice that we had 50, 60 years ago. It's all been concentrated. And whether it's through lack of advertising, whether it's through lawfare, prosecutions, and not giving them advertising, whichever means it is, it's been captured.
Hmm.
Now, journalists, we blame people and say, well, we no longer have decent journalists. Well, can you blame them for it? So not only that there's a media concentration, there is deterrent that's been put into place for the journalists as well. So coming back to the question, not only that the leaders are undermined, not leaders are pushed out even when they have a huge public mandate, the whole system is controlled by the entrenched elite with power and money.
Hmm.
So that's the scenario that we're in. But the scary picture is not even that. Scary picture is we are fast moving towards a dystopian society with the use of technology that's going to become available through AI, through surveillance, these smartphones and every search, every post, every this, all this profiling. We don't have to have a state like Russia or China. There can be soft authoritarianism, and with the cash money disappearing, and not that I'm against thingy and this, but the freedoms are bit by bit being curtailed. And if you have a non-democratic society, we're fast moving towards Orwellian society, a dystopian society. And then you see evidence of that. You see evidence of that. We're calling war kinetic action. Well, no, it's a war. It kills people. We bombing the hell out of civilian buildings and whatever. This is air campaign. Just sanitized phrases that kind of don't wake people up. That kind of doesn't sound bad. They're torturing people, renditions and torturing and whatever it is. Oh, it's enhanced interrogation. Putin invades Ukraine and he says, "Oh, it's special military operation." We surveilled, mass surveillance and whatever it is. Says, "Oh, it's public safety monitoring." Well, is it censorship? Well, it's content moderation. It's online safety. So we're fast moving towards this dystopian society. And that's because we have democracy in name, but not really in substance. It's been hollowed out. And this is what in Breaking Democracy's Chains. Not only that I explain these problems as how it's been hollowed out, is that there is a solution. There is a better system that we could move on to. We could upgrade our democracy. We could claim the democracy back. And we need to do it for sake of our children and grandchildren. And I think it's possible in our lifetimes.
And you make the kind of like the argument in the book as essentially that there would be a system that could be created of democratic engagement without the political parties, a kind of like a no sort of like party
Correct.
system. Could you explain what you mean by that and how that would sort of like function essentially?
Certainly. Well, it's worth for your audiences to highlight this one point. Political parties are not integral part of democracy. Democracy predates political parties. Now, 250 years ago, when American founding fathers were putting their own constitution together, their own systems together, almost every one of those was against factions and against political parties.
Mhm.
I think it was one of the fathers, George Abraham, I think, has said something along the lines of, paraphrasing again, if I was to go to heaven but with a party, I'd rather not go there at all. So they were dead against factions. But there was a big but. They lived in a different era. If you go back 250 years and try to visualize, well, go back to American films, cowboy films, that date back 100, 200 years. No radio, no internet, no television, no media, no social media, no newspapers. Information is not readily available. Communication is not instant. So they needed cues to function the democracy. Although they were against it, they couldn't really put anything in place of the political parties, and hence they had to go with it. Reluctantly, they had to go with the political parties despite their warnings. And I think one of the founding fathers said, I dread nothing more than the country divided into two great political parties that will subvert the will of the people. So when we go back in history, political parties are not integral part of democracy. So that's the first thing. But we're not taught this at schools. We've not been told this. Newspapers don't pick up on this kind of a thing. We take things for granted that as if we live in a perfect democracy. Well, no, democracy is a journey. We've not reached the destination. It's a journey. For Christ's sake, women's voting rights did not come until 1920s, some 300-400 years after male suffrage. So democracy has climbed many mountains. And it's we got to climb the next apex. We got to get the message out there to people to say, well, we need to climb this next. Democracy needs to climb this next apex, and that is to take parties out of the equation and remove them from between the voter and their representatives. So that brings me on to your question as to, if you take parties out, what do we put in its place? Well, actually, it's quite simple. It's quite simple. Because if you start off with our MPs, members of parliament, being elected without a party label in every constituency, I believe we have about 650 MPs. Is that more or less? Yeah. So assume for a moment, and question me on the details, please, by all means, but so that I don't bore your viewers on the technicalities, just to give them the overview. One, let's elect MPs independently without a party banner, party label. They can still put their 10 pledges on their voting card to say, well, okay, they stand for immigration control, they stand for lower taxes, they stand for more public spending, they stand for NHS or against NHS, whatever their pledges are, they can put it on their website or the government website for each constituency. And then we will know what each representative stands for. And we can even carry that message onto the ballot box so that people at the time of voting can see what each member for our constituency, each candidate for our constituency stands for. Then we vote the right person that we believe is serving our best interest. So now move on to stage two. Let's say we've got 650 elected MPs taking their place in the parliament on the green benches. Now, anybody who wants to become a national leader for us, want to become the prime minister, will throw their hat into the ring, provided they get a certain number of MPs backing them, they will be in the race. So if they get minimum number of MPs backing them, they will become a serious contender. So through a round of debates and discussions, the MPs will narrow the list down to two finalists. So the two finalists that commands the maximum support from the 650 independent MPs will then go to a national election so that public decides who they want as their leader. So finally, we can elect our prime minister. So the winning ticket will become form the government, will become the prime minister, and the runner-up will become the opposition leader. Now, they can, mandated by the public, they can set up their own cabinet and the shadow cabinet to scrutinize the policies and what have you. And then independent MPs will vote on issue-based, if you like. So if you and I are representatives for our constituencies, we MPs for our constituencies, we can agree, let's say, on immigration, but we'll vote differently on another issue, taxation. So the coalitions are formed on issue by issue. And that way, the accountability is not to the party. There's no party whipping. There is no blocks opposing one another, trying to bring one another down and not agreeing. Everybody works in the best interest of their constituency, and the government works in the best interest of the country. There's no, once you disperse the power, the money will find it a lot more difficult to control the system, to subvert the will of the people. There's nothing to capture. It's much more difficult to capture 650 MPs than a party here or a party there. Once you capture the leadership, you've got the full control. Then you've got your hands on the government levers, and then you decide how you want to do things, what laws you want to pass. Because the MPs are whipped. I mean, if you take Rory Stewart, he was saying it's a zombie parliament. We're told which way to vote, and we just press a button. So that's not democracy. That's not what democracy means. So, the other point that I want to make here is that this system that's proposed is not utopian. It's very, very simple, because we already have number of independent MPs. I mean, you mentioned one, Jeremy Corbyn. This filtering is massive. I mean, Diane Abbott was left outside the parliament by Keir Starmer because he's kind of a more or less, said he didn't want her because of her remarks in certain way, although she apologized for it. So the control and the grip of the party needs to come to an end. That's not democracy. So we are proposing that the party monopoly on representation is no longer democratic. It should not be there. It's not needed. And we need to work towards that goal. And it's possible, because if we get certain number of MPs, the debate becomes more mainstream, and then the legitimacy of the party system becomes questionable. It's opened up to debate. And that's what we've got to work towards. And I think it's possible in our lifetimes.
I mean, it is certainly something that I think that, as you say, more people are going to be discussing and debating, especially in years to come, given the kind of like greater number of independent MPs I'm sure that we're going to see in the next few years, in the sort of like the smaller parties as well, getting more of a significant foothold in Westminster. We're coming towards the end of the podcast, Metin. It's been wonderful to talk to you, but I do have one final question for you. If there is one thing that you would like anyone who has read the book or will read the book to take away from it, what's that one thing that you would most like them to leave reading the book, having thought or having sort of like taken away from reading the book?
I probably would say, do not take democracy for granted. Do not take our freedoms for granted. I know we have distraction from entertainment to social media and so on and so forth. I think don't lose hope, but don't take the given freedoms for granted because they're gradually eroding. Now, I'm not advocating for people not to vote for parties, not to vote. Do not vote for parties. My view is vote for independence, because that's where the true democracy is. Know this: you have one of the most powerful tools in your vote, that your vote is one of the most powerful tools in democracies. You've got to use that vote wisely. We can either vote have tribal politics to say, oh, I'm Labour, I'm Reform, I'm Conservative, whatever it is. You can either be tribalism and legitimize and endorse current party democracy, or you could withdraw your vote and vote independence and undermine this corrupt system. So if one thing I want people to take away from it, do not take your freedoms for granted and do not take your vote for granted. Use it with your conscience.
Absolutely. Well, I think that that's certainly something that anyone can take away from this podcast, is the importance of democracy and the importance of using your vote and using it in the most sort of like wise way possible and using it in the most effective way possible. Thank you once again for taking the time to speak to me, Metin.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbeam, and Amazon Music. You can also follow us on Twitter, @DebatedPodcast, like us on Facebook, Debated Podcast, and if you'd like to get in touch with us, whether about appearing on an episode of the podcast or commenting on an episode that you've listened to, you can do so at thedebatedpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you listen to the next one.